Imagine a moment, October 27th, 2020. Mönchengladbach, Germany, a cold autumn evening. The Borussia Park Stadium breathes dampness, and a drama unfolds on the field that does not match the status of the greatest club in the world, the group stage of the Champions League. Real Madrid is losing after the first half with a score of 0-1. The players descend slowly and heavily into the tunnel area. The stadium tunnel is a special place. It is the purgatory between the field and the locker room, where cameras usually capture the most sincere, least filtered emotions. Concrete walls, the echo of footsteps from metal cleats, the heavy breathing of athletes. The 20-year-old Brazilian winger of Real Madrid, Vinícius Jr, stands in this tunnel, waiting to go out for the second half. He is tense. He knows that the game is not going well. He knows that his decisions on the field in the first 45 minutes were far from ideal. But he believes in the team. He believes in his teammates. He believes in his idol, Karim Benzema, the French genius, the veteran, the leader of Madrid's attacks, whom he has always looked at with genuine youthful admiration. And so, a few meters away from Vinícius, Karim Benzema approaches his compatriot, left-back Ferland Mendy. They stand shoulder to shoulder. They cover their mouths with their hands, a common gesture for soccer players who do not want their words to be lip-read. But broadcaster microphones are working in the tunnel, and in the silence of the concrete corridor, the French language sounds clear and ruthless. Benzema says to Mendy, "He does what he wants. Brother, do not pass to him. I swear on my mother's life he is playing against us." Vinícius is standing nearby. He hears their voices, but he does not understand French. On his face is the same familiar, slightly naive, boyish smile. He does not even suspect that in this very second, the person for whom he was ready to break through walls on the soccer field, the person he called his older brother, has just cold-bloodedly, cynically, and publicly destroyed him. He does not know that in a few hours, this video will spread across all the social networks of the planet, that the Spanish, Brazilian, and world press will dismantle these words down to the atoms, that hundreds of millions of fans will laugh, watching how the team leader rejects his young teammate. Stop and try to grasp the depth of this psychological blow. Imagine that you are a 20-year-old guy. You have arrived in a foreign country. A price tag of 45 million euros hangs on you. Every day you are demanded to be the new Cristiano Ronaldo. You desperately try to prove your worth. You make mistakes. Your hands tremble from the pressure. You look for support in the locker room, among your own. And you find out that your own teammates are conspiring behind your back to ignore you on the field, to not give you the ball, that they consider you not just a bad player, but a burden pulling the team to the bottom. He is playing against us. This is a sentence. For most young soccer players, such an episode means the end. This is a mental breakdown, after which the player asks for a transfer, closes in on himself, breaks under the weight of paranoia and insecurity, and gradually disappears into the lower leagues. How can you ask for the ball, knowing that your teammate hates passing it to you? How can you go into a dribble, knowing that for every mistake you are cursed by those who stand with you in the same formation? But Vinícius did not break. He did not ask for a transfer. He did not cause a scandal in the press. He went out onto the field, clenched his teeth, and kept running, demanding the ball again and again and again. Why? Where did this skinny, smiling guy get such inhuman, titanium resilience? To find the answer to this question, we must leave the sterile, luxurious corridors of European stadiums. We must forget about multi-million contracts, about gold watches, and about intrigues in the locker rooms. We must cross the Atlantic Ocean and dive into a completely different world. There, where the words, "he is playing against us," have no meaning against the background of a real, physical struggle for survival. We transport ourselves to São Gonçalo. São Gonçalo is not the Rio de Janeiro shown in tourist brochures. There is no snow-white sand of Copacabana or Ipanema here. There is no statue of Christ the Redeemer blessing the city from the height of Corcovado here. São Gonçalo is a huge, overpopulated, poor municipality, separated from the glamorous Rio by a long concrete strip of the bridge over Guanabara Bay. This is another universe. Here the streets are covered with uneven, broken asphalt or simply red earth. Here the houses are built of unpainted brick, without roofs, with rebar sticking up into the sky in the hope that someday the family will have the money to finish building the second floor. Here the air smells of exhaust fumes from old buses, cheap fried food, and open sewage. But most importantly, here it smells of fear. This is a place where the line between life and death is thinner than paper. The Mutuan neighborhood, where Vinícius José Paixão de Oliveira Jr. was born, was the epicenter of this harsh reality. A boy's life in São Gonçalo is walking through a minefield. On one side are the drug cartels, which recruit children even before they learn to read, giving them weapons and a false sense of power. On the other side is the military police, whose armored vehicles, known as caveirões, big skulls, regularly burst into the favelas with gunfire, where a stray bullet does not distinguish who is a criminal and who is just walking to school. There are no safe zones in this world. Children learn to fall to the floor at the sound of gunshots earlier than they learn to tie their shoelaces. In this environment, it is impossible to have a fragile psyche. If you are afraid, you will be eaten. If you show weakness, you become a target. But even in this hell, there is one universal, sacred shield: the ball. When you run with the ball through the streets of São Gonçalo, the bandits lower their weapons. The police look away. You become untouchable. The ball is the only visa that allows you to cross the borders of warring factions. Vinícius understood this very early. He played on the streets, on the asphalt, sprinkled with broken glass and gravel. Playing there meant not just scoring goals. It meant surviving. If you do not know how to nutmeg a defender who is older and stronger than you will get a hit to the bones from which it is impossible to recover for weeks. Vinícius's dribbling, his plasticity, his unpredictable feints are not the result of work in the tactical classes of European academies. This is the instinct of self-preservation brought to the level of art. Every feint of his at the Bernabéu was once practiced where losing the ball could not just get you booed, but humiliated so much that you would never go out on the street again. However, talent alone in São Gonçalo is not enough. How many genius boys have disappeared in these slums, trading the ball for quick money from selling drugs or dying in cartel wars? Thousands. To break out of there, a force more powerful than soccer was needed. And this force became his family. The story of Vinícius is a story of a colossal, almost antique sacrifice of his father. He was also named Vinícius. Vinícius Sr. saw how his son beat older guys on the broken field. He saw a spark in him that he had no right to let extinguish. But the family had no money. They barely had enough for food, let alone paying for travel to elite soccer academies in Rio de Janeiro or buying real cleats. And then the father makes a decision that breaks his life, but gives life to his son. He leaves the family. He packs his few belongings and goes 400 kilometers away, to the metropolis of São Paulo. He does not go there for a beautiful life. He goes there to become a manual laborer, to lay cables, work on construction sites, carry heavy bags, breathe cement dust, and live in cheap, overcrowded dormitories for migrant workers. Imagine this daily routine of the father. He wakes up at dawn. He breaks his back under the scorching sun of São Paulo. He denies himself normal food, new clothes, and any joys of life. For what? So that at the end of the month, he could gather these crumbs, these bloodied, sweat-soaked reals, and send them back to São Gonçalo. This money had a very specific purpose. It did not go towards entertainment. It went towards paying for a bus ticket for Vinícius Jr. and buying him a pair of soccer cleats. Realize the psychological burden that falls on the shoulders of a 10-year-old child. Vinícius knew where this money came from. He saw how his father returned home for the holidays, aged, exhausted, with calluses on his hands that resembled the bark of an old tree. He understood that every time he stepped onto the soccer field was paid for by his father's health. For most children, such pressure would be paralyzing. The pressure of expectations, the feeling of the impossibility of making a mistake, the fear that the father's sacrifice would be in vain, this destroys an immature psyche. You go out on the field and are afraid to make a risky feint, afraid to lose the ball, afraid to disappoint. But Vinícius transformed this burden. He did not turn it into fear. He turned it into an absolute, impenetrable responsibility and into his smile. He smiled on the field not because he was having fun. He smiled because it was his way of showing his father, "Your sacrifice is not in vain. I am enjoying this. I will make you proud. His joy on the field was his armor. With this money from his father began the next stage of his trials, the path to Ninho do Urubu, the training base of the great Flamengo. It is now that we are used to seeing young talents being driven to practice by club minibuses or parents in luxurious SUVs. In the life of little Vinícius, there was nothing like that. The Flamengo base was located in another part of Rio, at a distance of over 70 kilometers from his home in São Gonçalo. 70 kilometers in the chaotic, dangerous traffic of the Brazilian metropolis. Every day, for years, Vinícius's routine looked like torture. He woke up at 4 or 5 in the morning, when the streets of the favela were still drowned in darkness, and from open windows one could hear drunken screams or the sounds of sirens. He quickly ate whatever was available for breakfast, grabbed his worn-out backpack, and went to the bus stop. He got on the first bus, old, rusty, crowded with tired workers heading to their shifts. He reached the center, transferred to another bus. Sometimes he had to change 3 or 4 modes of transport in one direction. Over 2.5 hours in stuffy, dirty transport, standing on his feet, holding onto the handrail, trying not to fall asleep so as not to miss the stop, or so that the very precious cleats bought with his father's blood would not be stolen from his backpack. Arriving at the base, exhausted from the trip, he changed clothes and went out onto the field. And there he met boys from the wealthy neighborhoods of Rio. Boys who slept for 8 hours in air-conditioned rooms, who ate meat every day, who were brought in cars. They looked down on him, a skinny boy from poor São Gonçalo. But as soon as the referee blew the whistle, Vinícius turned into a hurricane. He ran as if the asphalt was burning under his feet. He pushed the ball past them with such speed that they did not even have time to foul. He destroyed them physically and psychologically. Not because he just wanted to win in a practice match, but because after this practice, he again needed to go to the bus stop, wait for the bus, and rattle for 2.5 hours back, into the darkness of São Gonçalo, knowing that tomorrow this cycle would repeat. His dribbling was charged with the energy of survival. Every beaten defender was a step away from poverty. Every goal scored was a ticket that was supposed to bring his father home. Flamengo scouts looked at him with open mouths. The coaches of the Brazilian youth national teams began underlining his last name with a red marker in their notebooks. He played against those who were 2 or 3 years older and tore them apart. He became a star of the academy, and then of the youth team. He earned his first small contracts. But the most important moment of this period did not happen on the soccer field. It happened when Vinícius signed his first professional contract with Flamengo. The first thing he did was not buy himself a watch, not rent a luxurious house on the beach, not buy a sports car. The first thing he did was call his father in São Paulo. "Dad," he said, "pack your things. You do not have to work anymore. Come home. I will take care of us." Stop and feel the weight of these words. A 16-year-old teenager calls a grown man and frees him from slave labor. He closes his debt. He pulls his family out of the abyss. It is at this moment that the very titanium psyche of Vinícius Jr. is formed, which later could not be broken by the multi-thousand stands of the Santiago Bernabéu, nor by the racists in Spain, nor by the betrayal of senior comrades. When we return to that same cold tunnel in Mönchengladbach, where Karim Benzema says, "He is playing against us," we begin to understand why Vinícius did not break. What are the words of a rich French soccer player to a guy who survived in São Gonçalo? What is the criticism of the Spanish press to a person who knows what the torn, bloody calluses on his own father's hands look like? What is the laughter of millions of internet trolls compared to the sound of shootouts outside the window, when you lie on the floor and pray that a bullet does not pierce the thin wall? But Europe did not know this yet. Europe still considered him just a hyped, expensive Brazilian boy, whose price tag was his main achievement. The most terrifying athletic trial awaited him ahead. A trial not by poverty, but by fame that turned into public mockery. We are approaching the era when every movement of Vinícius was examined under a microscope, when his name became synonymous with clumsiness in front of empty nets, when the internet decided that he was the biggest transfer failure in the history of Real Madrid. We enter the psychological hell of the Santiago Bernabéu, where the meme boy had to either die as a soccer player or be reborn into a monster who would conquer this stadium. And how he will do it will become one of the greatest stories of overcoming in the soccer of the 21st century. Madrid. The summer of 2018. The sun scorches the capital of Spain so much that the asphalt melts underfoot. But the real heat, the real tension that cannot be measured by any thermometer, is concentrated in one specific place. At the Santiago Bernabéu Stadium. It is not just a stadium. It is the Roman Colosseum of the modern world. It is an empire that does not forgive weakness, does not tolerate mediocrity, and grinds human destinies with cold, aristocratic indifference. This summer, the empire experiences a shock. Its main god, its absolute idol, the machine for producing goals and trophies, Cristiano Ronaldo, has just packed his bags and left Madrid, leaving behind scorched earth, an empty throne, and 50 goals per season, which are now critically lacking. Who will replace the legend? Who will take on this inhuman burden? Club president Florentino Perez makes a bet that shocks Europe. He does not buy a ready-made superhero. He presents to the public a skinny, lanky guy with braces on his teeth, who just a few months ago was shaking in the buses of Rio de Janeiro. Vinícius Jr., 18 years old. The price tag is 45 million euros. An amount that for a guy from the favela of São Gonçalo sounds like an abstract mathematical infinity. He steps onto the perfectly trimmed, billiard table-like lawn of the Bernabéu in a snow-white uniform. Hundreds of cameras blind him with their flashes. He kisses the club's emblem. He smiles widely, sincerely, naively. He looks like a teenager who won a stadium tour in a lottery. But he is not a tourist. He is an investment. And Madrid, with its demanding, victory-spoiled fans, socios, demands that this investment start bringing dividends here and now. Today, already in the first match, stop and try to grasp the level of this psychological violence. From an 18-year-old child who does not know the language, who has never played European, tough, tactical soccer, they demand to become the savior of the greatest club in history. They give him the ball and say, "Entertain us. Win matches for us. Replace Cristiano for us." This is not just pressure. This is a ticket to a psychiatric hospital for any normal person. And when the season begins, what was supposed to happen happens. The collision of two different worlds. The world of Brazilian street dribbling breaks against the cold, ruthless wall of European reality. Vinícius takes the field, and his speed shocks everyone. He turns on like a jet engine. He receives the ball on the left flank, pushes it past one defender, bypasses a second on a crazy sprint, makes a sharp turn, leaving the third on the lawn. The stadium rises to its feet. 70,000 people hold their breath. Everyone sees in him that same magic, that same spark of genius. He bursts into the penalty box. Before him is only the goalkeeper. There remains one simple movement, the finishing strike, a regular, calm pass into the net. But in this millisecond, when a decision needs to be made, the brain of the 18-year-old guy simply shuts down. His legs, which just worked with filigree, divine precision, suddenly turn into lead logs. Vinícius leans his body back, closes his eyes, and strikes. The ball flies, but it does not fly into the corner of the goal. It flies into the 15th row of the stands. It flies into the corner flag. It flies right into the chest of the goalkeeper, who did not even have time to make a move. And then it sounds. A sound that is more terrifying than any whistle or curse. The Bernabéu does not whistle. The Bernabéu lets out a deep, loud, disappointed sigh. Oh! This sound spreads over the field like a thick fog. It is not hate, it is pity. And for an elite athlete, there is nothing more humiliating, nothing more destructive than being pitied. This sigh means, he failed again. He is not the one we need. He is just a runner without brains. This repeats match after match, week after week, month after month. The scenario becomes terribly, pathologically unchanged. Vinícius creates a masterpiece up to the penalty box, beats everyone, and at the moment of finishing, makes a laughingstock of himself. He misses from 3 meters. He misses empty nets. He gets tangled in his own legs and falls on the ball at the most crucial moment. The biomechanics of his strike look broken. Journalists and analysts begin to examine his actions under a microscope. They say smart things. He rushes too much. His pulse in the penalty box reaches 200 beats per minute. He does not see the goal, he only sees fear. But these smart explanations do not interest the crowd. The crowd needs a scapegoat. Welcome to the era of digital crucifixion. Welcome to the era of memes. The internet is the cruelest tribunal of the 21st century. It has no empathy. It does not care about age, about your past in São Gonçalo, about the sacrifices of your father. The internet sees only the miss and turns it into an instrument of public torture. Every inaccurate strike by Vinícius is instantly clipped, overlaid with funny music, and flies around in millions of reposts on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Spanish sports shows like the infamous El Chiringuito, where journalists scream, gesticulate, and put on theatrical performances, turn Vinícius into their main target. The hosts grab their heads, fall to the floor, recreating his misses in the studio to the laughter of the audience. They invent offensive nicknames for him. Fictitious, fake. Vinícius Miss Jr., Vinícius who misses. Thousands of clown emojis appear in the comments under every photo of him. People write, "Return him to the favela." This is Florentino Perez's biggest scam. He can beat his own shadow, but he could not hit the ocean with a ball while standing on the beach. Imagine what it is like to be him at this time. He walks into the locker room after the match. He sits on the bench. His uniform is wet with sweat. His lungs are burning. He picks up his phone. This is the reflex of a modern young guy. He opens social networks, and a tsunami of poison pours onto him. Millions of people are laughing at him. Imagine this paralyzing shame. You cannot hide. You cannot change your name and disappear. The whole world knows your face, and the whole world considers you a €45 million failure. How does a regular, normal soccer player react to such a level of psychological destruction? History knows hundreds of examples. Players who broke under the pressure of big clubs turned on the so-called hiding on the field mode. This is a very subtle, subconscious mechanism of self-defense. The player takes the field, but he does everything possible to avoid taking responsibility. He hides behind the backs of opponents so that they do not pass to him. And when he receives the ball, he takes one touch and instantly gives a safe pass back to the defender or across the field, just not to take a risk, just not to make a mistake that will make the stands sigh again and the internet create a new meme. The player becomes a gray mouse. He survives, but he dies as a personality. He is sold to a mid-level club where he finishes his career, forever broken by the fear of a mistake. And now look at what Vinícius Jr. did. It was precisely in this darkness, in this endless, humiliating stream of criticism and laughter that his greatness was forged. A greatness worth hundreds of scored goals. He missed from 2 meters. The stadium buzzed. Journalists in the press box laughed and shook their heads. Do you know what happened 2 minutes after that? Vinícius would raise his hand again and shout, "Give me the ball!" He received the ball on the flank, and he went again into that same risky, reckless, audacious dribble against 2 defenders. He did not pass back. Never. They knocked him off his feet. The goalkeeper caught his next strike, but he got up from the lawn. He adjusted his socks. He smiled. With that same wide, snow-white, naive smile, and he asked for the ball again. This smile drove the Spanish press crazy. They perceived it as proof of his short-sightedness. They wrote, "He does not even understand how bad he is. He laughs after letting the team down. He does not respect the Real Madrid shirt." But they understood nothing. They did not know that this smile was not stupidity. It is titanium armor. It is the armor that São Gonçalo forged for him. It is the armor of a guy who knows what real pain is. How could he be afraid of the whistling of some clerks or businessmen in the stands of the Bernabéu if he grew up among people holding assault rifles in their hands? How could he hide from the ball if this ball is what brought his father back from slave labor in São Paulo? For Vinícius, giving up attempts to beat an opponent, giving up risk, giving up his soccer meant betraying himself. He would rather miss 1,000 times in front of the eyes of the whole planet than be afraid to try once. His psyche turned out to be made of a material that defies analysis. With every meme, with every mockery, with every derogatory comment, he did not diminish. He stubbornly continued to toe his line. Imagine this picture. The 80th minute of a match against a hypothetical Getafe or Mallorca. The scoreboard says 0-0. The Spanish La Liga is not just about a beautiful pass. It is a league where dirty, tough, cynical defenders play. Teams from the lower part of the table have one tactic against Madrid, hitting the legs of those who try to create. Vinicius is beaten ruthlessly. In one match, he can receive 10 hits on his ankles, on his calves. They pull his shirt. They push him into the advertising boards. Referees are often silent, believing that the Brazilian dives too much. He falls. On his face is a grimace of pain. He looks at his own legs, on which the marks of other people's cleats are visible. He gets up. Through the pain, he receives the ball. He sees that same defender who just tried to break his leg. A normal person would pass to avoid a new collision. But Vinicius intentionally slows down. He looks right into the eyes of his executioner. He makes a body movement, flips the ball between the legs of this defender, and runs away, leaving him to swallow dust and humiliation. This is his form of revenge. He punishes them with his dance. He refuses to be a victim. And right here, in this darkest period of his career, when it seemed everyone had turned away from him, from the press to his own teammates in the tunnel of Mönchengladbach, he laid the foundation of his immortality. Because those Real Madrid fans who previously sighed with disappointment began to feel something else. They began to notice this unbreakability. They saw that this guy had no fear. Real Madrid is a club that historically adores warriors. You might not be perfect, but if you fight for the white shirt to the last drop of sweat, if you do not give up after a fall, the Bernabéu begins to respect you. The respect was not yet love, but it was no longer pity. The stadium stopped sighing. The stadium started waiting for the quantity of attempts to turn into quality. Vinicius knew that his problem was not in his legs. His problem was in his head. His dribbling was so fast that his own nervous system could not keep up with him at the moment of the finishing strike. He created chaos around himself, but this chaos sucked him in as well. He needed someone who could stop time around him within the radius of the penalty box. Someone who could get into his head and turn off the panic there. Someone who would not yell at him for misses, but just put a hand on his shoulder and say the right words. An athlete experiencing a crisis is like a drowning person. If around him are people shouting at him that he is swimming poorly, he will go to the bottom faster. He needed a hand. The hand of a sage, the hand of a father. And this hand reached out to him in the summer of 2021, when a man with an eternally raised left eyebrow, a calm gaze, and an aura of absolute soccer wisdom returned to the coaching bridge of Real Madrid. Carlo Ancelotti. The arrival of Ancelotti became that very watershed that divided the history of Vinícius Jr. into before and after. We end the era of psychological hell, the era of memes, mockery, fear, and betrayal. Vinicius survived. He passed through the fire and did not burn. He kept his smile. He kept his desire to go into dribbling. His psyche withstood a trial that would have broken 99% of grown men. Now the time for reward had come. The time when the chaos in his head would turn into the coldest, most cynical, and deadliest weapon in European soccer. We are approaching a metamorphosis, to goals that will silence the entire internet, and to that very strike in Paris that will make Karim Benzema celebrate together with the one against whom he once urged not to play. This is a story about how the meme boy was going to become a king, and it all begins with one simple rule from the Italian coach. The summer of 2021. Madrid is melting again from the ruthless Spanish sun, but a completely different climate prevails at the Valdebebas training base. A person returns there who brings with him an atmosphere of absolute, impenetrable, almost mystical equilibrium. Carlo Ancelotti, the Italian maestro with the eternally raised left eyebrow, a man who has seen everything in soccer, from great triumphs to the most bitter defeats. He is not a dictator coach who breaks players over his knee, forcing them to fit into rigid, dry tactical schemes. Ancelotti is a soccer psychoanalyst. He comes into a team that is at a crossroads, and his main task becomes not changing the formation, but resuscitating souls. And the first soul to which he turns his attention belongs to a guy whom the press and the internet have almost written off as the most expensive clown in the history of Real Madrid. Their first conversation in Ancelotti's office was not a long tactical lecture. The Italian sat Vinicius across from him. He looked at this 20-year-old youth, whose psyche was torn apart by memes, whistling, and betrayals. Ancelotti did not start dissecting his misses. He did not turn on the video where Vinicius misses empty nets. He said a phrase to him that changed the course of European soccer history. "Vinny, you play as if a tiger is chasing you. You run faster than you think. In the penalty box, the speed of your legs is not needed. Silence is needed there. When you find yourself in front of the goalkeeper, pause. Let him make the first step. You have time. You always have time." For a player who was used to surviving on the streets of São Gonçalo thanks to pure animal instinct and lightning-fast reaction, the concept of stopping seemed like suicide. But Ancelotti began to break this neural network. In training, he introduced a strict iron rule for Vinícius. In the penalty box, you have the right to only one, maximum 2 touches of the ball. No extra feints, no fuss. Received, evaluated, struck. Ancelotti forced him to shoot not with power, as Vinícius did before, closing his eyes out of fear, but for accuracy. "Shoot as if you are simply passing the ball into the net, as if it is your friend," said Carlo. This process did not happen in one day. Biomechanics and muscle memory cannot be rewritten with the snap of fingers. These were weeks of exhausting, monotonous routine. Vinícius stayed after general practices. He received the ball at speed, burst into the penalty box, and forced himself to break. This is the hardest thing for an elite sprinter, to be able to shift gears from 5th to 1st in a millisecond. His brain screamed, "Shoot faster," because the defender is already flying into a tackle. And Ancelotti's voice in his head sounded in a soft baritone. "Wait, look at the goalkeeper. Wait." And Vinícius waited. He learned to see not just the white line of the goal, but the space between the goalkeeper's hand and the post. He learned to read the body language of goalkeepers. The chaos in his head, which previously turned the finishing strike into a panicked lottery, began to crystallize into an icy, calculating calm. The beginning of the 2021 to 2022 season became the stage on which the world first saw the fruits of this metamorphosis. August. A match against Levante. Vinícius comes on as a substitute in the second half when Real Madrid is losing. He receives the ball on the left flank, bursts into the penalty box. Previously in such a situation, he would have struck with all his might right into the goalkeeper. But now something anomalous happens. He approaches the goalkeeper, time seems to slow down, he makes a short pause, sees that the goalkeeper takes a step forward, and with a light, mockingly soft movement chips the ball over him. The ball slowly, in a perfect arc, drops into the net. The stadium freezes. This was not the strike of a runner. This was the strike of an elite sniper. This was the strike of a person who fully controls space and time. That same evening, he scores another goal, from an incredibly sharp angle, curling the ball so that it licks the post and flies into the goal. The next day, the Spanish press, which just yesterday invented offensive nicknames for him, comes out with the headlines. What did Ancelotti do with Vinícius? They did not understand that the Italian did not implant new legs into him. He simply freed his mind from the burden of fear. But the deepest, most difficult psychological duel that Vinícius had to win that season was not about the opponent's defenders or journalists. It was about the man who wore number 9 and the captain's armband, Karim Benzema. That same tunnel in Mönchengladbach, those same words, "He is playing against us," hung between them in the locker room like an invisible, poisonous cloud. A normal player with an inflated ego after such an incident would never have passed to the Frenchman again. He would have sabotaged his game. He would have tried to prove his own superiority, pulling the blanket over himself, shooting from impossible positions, just not to share the glory with the one who betrayed him. But remember where Vinícius grew up? In São Gonçalo, you will not survive if your ego stands above the goal. Vinícius's goal was not to prove Benzema wrong with words or insults. Vinícius's goal was to make Benzema depend on him, and he began to feed the Frenchman with passes. It was a silent, brilliant process of conquest through service. Vinícius destroyed his defender on the flank, drew 2 or 3 opponent players to himself, leaving Benzema in absolute solitude in the center of the penalty box. And then, instead of shooting himself, he executed a perfect pass, measured to the millimeter, onto Karim's foot. Once. A second time. A 10th time. He gave him assists into empty nets. He did all the dirtiest, hardest work of breaking down the defense, so that Benzema only had to put his foot in. Karim Benzema is a smart man. He is one of the greatest soccer intellectuals of his generation. Very soon he understood. This Brazilian boy, whom he laughed at a year ago, had turned into his main weapon. Without Vinícius's speed, without his ability to stretch the defense, without his assists, the aging Benzema would simply have suffocated in the grip of young European defenders. Karim realized that his path to the Ballon d'Or lay exclusively through the legs of Vinícius, and a chemistry was born between them that Madrid had not seen since the days of the duo of Cristiano and that same Benzema. But this was a different chemistry. It was a symbiosis of a young, unstoppable predator and an old, wise wolf. They began to understand each other on a telepathic level. If Vinícius shifted to the center, Karim moved to the flank. If Karim dropped deep, Vinícius burst into the created zone behind the defenders' backs. After every goal scored, Benzema was the first to run to Vinícius, picked him up in his arms, pointed a finger at him in front of the Bernabéu stands, as if apologizing for the past and publicly acknowledging, "He is my brother. He plays for us." Vinícius did not demand apologies. His smile and his assists were the best apology that the soccer world could possibly accept. The meme boy forced his harshest critic to become his most ardent fan. The 2021 to 2022 season turned into an epic. Into a journey in which Real Madrid refused to obey the laws of logic, physics, and probability. Their path in the Champions League that year is a series of clinical deaths and resurrections, for which there are no analogues in the history of sports. And in each of these resurrections, the heart defibrillator was Vinícius. The round of 16. Paris Saint-Germain, the team of oil billions, the team of Messi, Neymar, and Mbappé. Real Madrid loses in Paris 0-1. In Madrid, Mbappé scores again, 0-1. In total, 0-2. Half an hour remains until elimination. Madrid looks old, slow, doomed. But Vinícius does not stop. He continues to run into the press. In the 61st minute, he makes a crazy sprint, forcing Gianluigi Donnarumma to make a mistake under pressure. The ball bounces to Benzema. Karim passes to Vinícius. Vinícius returns it back to Karim. Goal. The stadium explodes. The spark is lit. In the next 17 minutes, Benzema scores a hat-trick. But who created this chaos? Who scorched the flank of Achraf Hakimi so much that he could barely breathe? It was Vinícius. Quarterfinal. Chelsea, the previous year's winners of the tournament. The second leg at the Bernabéu. Madrid is losing 0-3 on their own field. The aggregate score is in favor of the Londoners. The 80th minute. It seems this is the end. But Luka Modric carves out a genius pass with the outside of his foot to Rodrigo, who equalizes the aggregate score. The game goes into extra time. The 96th minute. Who receives the ball on the flank? Vinícius. His legs are filled with lead. Lactic acid is tearing his muscles after 100 minutes of continuous running. But he raises his head, sees Benzema's movement, and instead of shooting himself, perfectly, with surgical precision tosses the ball right onto the Frenchman's head. Goal. Real Madrid moves on. But the most absurd, greatest confirmation of his individual evolution happened in the semifinal. Against Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. City is a team of robots playing perfect positional soccer. The first match in England. The score is 3-1 in favor of City. Real Madrid is pressed against the ropes. The 55th minute of the match. Vinícius receives the ball on the left flank, still in his own half of the field. Fernandinho comes out against him, a veteran, a tough destroyer, a person who does not let you breathe. Vinícius is standing facing his own goal. The ball flies to him. Fernandinho rushes forward to play ahead of him. And at this moment, Vinícius does what makes the world hold its breath. He does not touch the ball. He simply lets it pass between his legs, simultaneously turning 180 degrees. Fernandinho flies past him into the void. Vinícius finds himself with the ball in open space. To Ederson's goal, 50 meters of perfect green lawn. Vinícius shifts into fifth gear. He runs the way he ran from trouble in São Gonçalo. His speed reaches over 35 kilometers per hour. Not a single City defender can catch up with him. He bursts into the penalty box. Here it is, that same spot. That same spot where a year ago he leaned back, closed his eyes, and shot into the 15th row of the stands. That same spot the whole internet laughed at. Time slows down again. He sees Ederson coming out to meet him, trying to narrow the shooting angle. Ancelotti's voice in his head sounds clearly. Wait. Let him take a step. Vinícius makes a micro-pause. Just a fraction of a second. Ederson shifts his weight to one leg. And Vinícius, with an icy, computer-like calm, does not shoot with power. He softly, mockingly, elegantly sends the ball into the far corner, under the goalkeeper's standing leg. The ball is in the net. 3-2. This was not the goal of a meme boy. This was the goal of a predator who had reached absolute perfection. And although Real Madrid lost that match 4-3, it was this goal that allowed Madrid to preserve their chances for the second leg at the Bernabéu, where that same famous miracle happened with 2 goals from Rodrigo in the 90th and 91st minutes. Madrid advanced to the final. They survived 3 clinical deaths. They broke the laws of soccer, and now Paris awaited them. Stade de France. May 28, 2022. The Champions League final. The opponent, Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool. A heavy metal machine, a team that at that time was considered the best in the world, hungry for victory and wanting revenge for the defeat to Real Madrid in the final of 2018. The atmosphere around this final was toxic, viscous, electrified to the limit even before the starting whistle. Chaos was happening outside the stadium. The French police used tear gas against Liverpool fans who could not get into the stands. The start of the match was delayed by 36 minutes. The players warmed up, returned to the locker room, and went out onto the field again. This is the worst thing that can happen to an elite athlete before the main match of their life. The destruction of the pre-match routine. Waiting burns out adrenaline. Muscles cool down. Nerves stretch like strings. But Vinícius sat in the locker room and listened to music. He was calm. He remembered his journey. He knew that today his father was watching him from the stands of the Stade de France. That same father who once mixed cement in São Paulo. Today they were here, on top of the world. No delayed start could scare a guy who survived in the favelas. The match begins, and from the very first minutes, it becomes clear that Liverpool came to destroy. The English team presses as if their lives depend on it. Sadio Mane hits the post. Mohamed Salah strikes blow after blow. Thibaut Courtois, the goalkeeper of Real Madrid, plays the match of his entire life. He flies to the corners like a giant spider, deflecting balls that are impossible to deflect. Madrid is pressed against their own goal. They endure. They suffer. Vinícius plays on the left flank against Trent Alexander-Arnold, one of the best attacking defenders in the world, but also one of the most prone to positional mistakes. Ancelotti told Vinícius before the game, "Stand on the flank. Stand and wait. Do not drop too deep. Trent will go forward and leave a corridor behind his back. You will need only one chance. Just one." The first half ends without goals. The second half begins with the same frantic pressure from Liverpool. The air in the stadium is saturated with the smell of smoke bombs, sweat, and tension. The 59th minute approaches. And here, that very movement begins, which will enter the textbooks of soccer history as the standard of geometric perfection and restraint. Everything starts from the center of the field. Casemiro, the defensive midfielder, wins the battle and gives the ball to the right back Dani Carvajal. Carvajal does not hold it, but in one touch passes forward into the stride of Fede Valverde. Valverde, the Uruguayan express, a player with the lungs of a marathoner and the strength of a bull. He begins to pull the ball down the right flank. Liverpool's defense begins to shift there, into the zone of the ball. Virgil van Dijk takes a step to the right. Ibrahima Konate shifts. Trent Alexander-Arnold, who should have been controlling the left flank of Real Madrid's attack, for a moment turns his head to the center, watching the movement of Karim Benzema, who draws the attention of the entire defensive line. Trent looks at the ball. This is a cardinal mistake for a defender in the penalty box, losing sight of his direct opponent in the blind spot. And where is Vinícius at this moment? He is on the opposite, left flank. He is not running with all his might. He is sneaking. He moves like a ghost at the far post. He perfectly calculates his movement, staying behind Trent's back, but at the same time avoiding an offside position. Fede Valverde reaches the edge of the penalty box. He swings. Everyone thinks he is going to shoot. Goalkeeper Alisson Becker prepares for a low shot. But Valverde does not shoot. He delivers a strong, sharp, slicing cross parallel to the goal line. The ball flies across the grass at breakneck speed, bypassing the legs of Van Dijk. It flies past Konate. It flies past Alisson, who stretches out his hand in vain. The ball rolls to the far post, exactly where, at this very second, the guy with number 20 on his back bursts in. This second, when the ball covers the last 2 meters to his foot, time at the Stade de France stops completely. For Vinícius, this ball rolling on the green lawn carries not just a chance to win the Champions League. This ball is a capsule in which his entire life is concentrated. All those impoverished days in São Gonçalo, all those tears of his mother when there was nothing to pay the bills with, every drop of cement mortar that his father mixed, every second of shaking in rusty buses on the way to the Flamengo base, every offensive meme, every giggle from the Bernabéu stands, every headline about Perez's biggest failure. All those words of Karim Benzema in the tunnel. He is playing against us. All of this lies right here, on the lawn, half a meter from his right foot. In the past, he would have panicked. He would have struck too hard, and the ball would have flown over the crossbar. He would have struck too weakly, and the defender would have had time to clear it off the line. He would have missed. But not today, not after what he went through, not after Ancelotti's lessons. Vinícius does not close his eyes. He looks at the ball and performs the hardest strike in soccer. He simply allows the ball to meet his foot at a perfect angle. Strike. One touch. The ball flutters in the net. The silence, which lasted a fraction of a second, is torn to pieces. The Stade de France explodes. Half the stadium, dressed in white, goes crazy. The roar of tens of thousands of fans mixes with the shouts of commentators around the world. Vinícius does not stop. He turns around and runs to the corner flag. His face is no longer adorned by that naive, defensive smile with which he hid from the pain. His face is distorted by a scream of absolute, wild, animal catharsis. He falls to his knees, kisses the crest on his shirt, beats his chest, and screams into the night Parisian sky. Who is the first to run to him to share this moment? Who falls on top of him, hugging him so tightly as if he is his own brother? It is Karim Benzema, that same man who asked not to give him the ball. Now this man understands that this very guy, this very goal will make him, Karim, the winner of the Ballon d'Or in a few months. They hug on the grass of Paris. All sins are forgiven. All doubts are dispelled. The rest of the match turns into a benefit performance for Thibaut Courtois, who pulls out everything that flies into his goal. The whistle. Real Madrid wins its 14th Champions Cup. The players cry, confetti falls from the sky. The anthem of the tournament plays. And Vinícius stands aside. He searches with his eyes for his family in the stands. He finds them. He cries. These tears are not tears of weakness. These are tears of purification. That night in Paris, the meme boy died. Vinícius the fictitious died. The player whom people could laugh at died. That night, a king was born into the world. A person who proved that you can go through the most brutal psychological meat grinder of modern sports, not lose yourself, not become embittered at the world, and turn your pain into a triumph that will enter the history books. But if you think that after scoring the winning goal in the Champions League final his struggle was over, you underestimate the cruelty of the world. On the soccer field, he proved everything. He became an elite player. He became a superstar whose value exceeds 100 million euros. But as soon as he became the best, as soon as he started dancing on the bones of his opponents, showing his superiority, Spanish society showed him its true, ugly face. A battle far more terrifying than the criticism of misses awaited him ahead. A battle that goes far beyond the soccer field. A battle for human dignity. We are approaching the era of Baila Vini, to the war against racism, to that very night at the Mestalla, when Vinícius refused to be a silent victim and forced an entire country to look in the mirror. This is a story of how his dance became a symbol of resistance, and his smile a weapon of mass destruction. And it is there, in this confrontation with hate, that his immortal legacy will take its final shape. But more on that in the final act of our drama. When you stand on top of the world never forgives you for your greatness, especially if you came there from the bottom, especially if your skin is dark and your smile is too bright for a continent accustomed to restraint, discipline, and submission. The winning goal in the Champions League final in Paris should have been the period after which all critics, all haters, and all internet trolls should have simply shut up, bowed their heads, and admitted their defeat. He proved everything. He won the most important trophy. He became the elite. But social psychology is a dark, primeval forest inhabited by the most disgusting human instincts. As long as Vinícius Jr. was just a boy who missed from 2 meters, people could laugh at him. He was funny. He was safe. He was that same silly Brazilian against whom others seemed better, smarter, more perfect to themselves. But as soon as this boy stopped missing, as soon as he started humiliating the best defenders in Europe, as soon as he started scoring winning goals and dancing over the bodies of fallen opponents, the laughter in the stands of Spanish stadiums suddenly stopped, and something else took its place. Much more terrifying, much more toxic. The laughter was replaced by pure, uncontrolled animal hatred. If you want to understand what modern soccer looks like outside of glossy television broadcasts and commercials, you have to look at what Vinícius went through in Spain in the period from 2022 to 2024. This was no longer a ball game. It was a war of attrition. A war in which not 11 opponent players united against a 22-year-old guy, but tens of thousands of people in the stands, fueled by the tacit consent of referees and sports officials. Imagine the routine of his away matches. Real Madrid arrives to visit Mallorca, Osasuna, Valladolid, or Atletico. The team bus is just pulling up to the stadium, and the crowd is already waiting. And this crowd is not shouting soccer chants. Hundreds, thousands of people, including grown men, women, teenagers, and even parents holding their small children in their arms, begin to make monkey grunts. Ooh, 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 ooh. They beat their chests. They shout in Spanish. Mono, monkey. Muérete, die. Negro de mierda, dirty black. Try for a second to get inside the head of a young person sitting behind the tinted glass of this bus and hearing this. You did nothing wrong to them. You did not steal their money. You did not insult their families. You simply play a ball game better than others. You simply were born with a different skin color on the other side of the planet. And for this, a whole crowd of Europeans who consider themselves part of the civilized world are ready to tear you to pieces, discarding their own humanity and turning into a primitive, aggressive pack. For most players, such pressure becomes fatal. Racism in soccer has always existed, and there was always one unwritten, cowardly rule imposed on the victims. Do not pay attention. Stay silent. If you react, you give them what they want. Just play soccer and let your feet do the talking for you. Soccer officials for years created beautiful "Say No to Racism" campaigns, shot video clips, distributed armbands with the right slogans to captains, but when it came to the actual protection of a player on the field, the system looked away. Referees asked the insulted players to calm down and continue the game. Officials issued ridiculous fines of a few thousand euros to the clubs, an amount that a La Liga-level club earns in 2 minutes of selling beer at the stadium. The system demanded that black players be silent, convenient victims. Be gladiators who entertain the public, endure spits in the face, and do not complain. But Vinícius was not a convenient victim. He was a guy from São Gonçalo. And in São Gonçalo, if you are attacked, you do not lower your eyes. You hit back. He refused to play by their rules. He refused to endure. When the defenders on the field began to hit his legs with double brutality, trying to provoke him, trying to break him physically to satisfy the crowd, Vinícius did not hide. He took the ball. He went right at them. He made even more feints. He chipped the ball over their heads. He fell from hits to his ankles, got up, looked his offender right in the eyes, and laughed. And when he scored a goal, what drove Spain crazy began. He would go to the corner flag, stand right in front of the tribune from which lighters and racist insults had been flying at him a minute ago, and start dancing. It was not just a dance. It was not a cheap provocation or an act of narcissism, as Spanish journalists tried to present it. To understand the true meaning of this dance, you need to turn to the history of Brazil, to the philosophy of capoeira. Capoeira is a martial art that African slaves brought to Brazil disguised as a dance, because they were forbidden to train to fight. They danced to the rhythms of drums, smiled, but every movement of theirs was a deadly blow hidden behind the plasticity of the body. Joy and dance were their only weapon against chains, the only way to preserve their identity and their soul in conditions of total, inhuman oppression. When Vinícius danced in Spanish stadiums, he was doing exactly this. His dance was modern capoeira. It was his manifesto, his loudest statement. You can call me names. You can hit my legs. You can throw garbage at me. You can despise me for the color of my skin. But you will never, do you hear? Never be able to steal my joy. You will never make me forget where I come from. I will dance in your stadiums, on your ruins, and you will watch this, powerless to change anything. This dance was his impenetrable armor. But the Spanish sports press, instead of condemning racism in the stands, started attacking Vinícius for his dances. In the studios of respected television programs, experts with serious faces said, he provokes the public. He does not respect opponents. This is not customary in Europe. If he stops dancing and making faces, the stands will stop insulting him. Realize the level of this absurdity and cynicism. They blamed the victim of racism for provoking racism with his joy. In one of the television programs, the head of the Spanish Association of Soccer Agents said a phrase on live television that shook the world. Vinícius must stop acting like a monkey and stop dancing. The word was spoken. The masks were dropped. It was a turning point. And it was then that the entire Brazilian nation and the entire global soccer world rose in defense of Vinícius. Neymar wrote to him, "Dance, brother." Pelé, who was living his last days, wrote to him, "Soccer is joy. It is a dance. Do not stop." Ronaldo Nazario supported him. The hashtag #BailaVini, Dance Vini, appeared online. This hashtag became not just a trend, it became a global resistance movement. But the hate on the streets of Madrid went beyond words. In January 2023, on the eve of the Madrid derby against Atletico, Spain woke up to a horrific criminal scene. A mannequin was hanged on one of the bridges near the Real Madrid training base. The mannequin was dressed in a Vinícius shirt with the number 20, and above it hung a banner, "Madrid hates Real." Stop. Inhale this air. A hanged mannequin of a black player on a bridge in a European capital in the 21st century. This is a direct, unconcealed death threat. This is an act of terrorism, an act of the Ku Klux Klan transferred into soccer reality. What normal person will be able to take the field after this? Who will be able to think about tactics, about passes, about soccer, knowing that somewhere in the city there are people walking around who literally imitate your hanging? Many would ask for protection, hire extra security, or refuse to play altogether, citing psychological trauma. But they again forgot who they were dealing with. They forgot about São Gonçalo. Vinícius saw things on the streets of his childhood far more terrifying than a plastic mannequin. He knew what real death looked like, not a cheap theatrical performance by cowardly racists hiding their faces at night. That same evening, he took the field against Atletico. The stadium whistled at his every touch of the ball. They tried to break him, but in the 121st minute of extra time, when the opponent's defenders were already falling off their feet from fatigue, Vinícius received the ball, dragged it into the penalty box, sent it into the net with a jeweler's strike, putting an end to the match, 3-1. And what did he do next? He ran to the stands and started dancing. Even more emotionally, even more uninhibitedly than ever. He shoved this goal right down the throats of those who hanged that mannequin. He did not break. He became even sharper. However, the climax of this war, the battle that will forever change the history of Spanish soccer and make Vinícius a figure of the scale of Muhammad Ali or Martin Luther King in the world of sports, took place a few months later. May 2023. Mestalla Stadium, City of Valencia. This match will enter the textbooks. Not because of the result, not because of the tactics, but because that evening one guy decided that he had had enough, that he would no longer put up with the hypocrisy of the system. The atmosphere at Mestalla was poisonous even before the match began. As the Real Madrid bus pulled up to the stadium, thousands of Valencia fans greeted it with a massive, rhythmic chant. Vinícius is a monkey! Not a few individuals. Not a group of hooligans. Thousands of people. It was mass insanity. During the game, a hunt was taking place on the field. Valencia's defenders fouled him roughly, harshly, provoking a conflict. The stands made monkey sounds at his every touch. The referee pretended that nothing extraordinary was happening. Soccer continued as if it were an ordinary evening. The 70th minute is approaching. Vinícius is running with the ball down the flank. One of the Valencia fans throws a second ball onto the field to disrupt the Real Madrid attack. A Valencia defender kicks this second ball right into the ball that Vinícius is dribbling. The game stops. Pushing begins. The stands behind the Valencia goal explode with a new dose of hate, and right here happens the moment that stopped time. Any other player would have turned around and walked to the center of the field, but Vinícius stops. He turns his whole body towards the tribune behind the goal. His eyes, which usually radiate a smile, are now black as coal and cold as steel. He walks closer to the advertising boards. He raises his right hand, and he points his index finger right into the crowd, right in the face of one specific fan who stands in the front rows, shouting racist insults at him. "It was you!" shouts Vinícius, not lowering his finger. "You! I see you!" Imagine this scene. One 22-year-old guy stands opposite a 40,000 crowd that wants to tear him apart. He stands alone against the system. He does not look away. He does not lower his finger. He demands that the referee stop the game. He calls the police. He demands that this fan be escorted out of the stadium. Valencia players run up to him, trying to push him away, trying to force him to be silent and continue the game. The Valencia captain yells at him, "Calm down, just play!" The referee asks him to step away. But Vinícius does not step away. He pushes away the opposing players. He tells the referee right to his face, "I will not play. Until they stop, I will not take a single step." It was an act of absolute civic and human courage. He broke protocol. He refused to be a silent victim. He forced the stadium announcer to make an official warning about the suspension of the match due to racism. He forced the game to stop for 10 minutes. He drew the attention of all the television cameras of the world to the fact that in Spain, in 2023, open, unpunished fascism was flourishing in a soccer stadium. The game eventually resumed, but it was no longer a game. It was a street fight. In the last minutes of the match, Valencia players provoked a mass brawl. In the crush, one of the opponent's players grabbed Vinícius by the throat, trying to choke him. Vinícius brushed him off, hitting the opponent in the face with his hand. And what does the referee do after looking at VAR? He sends Vinícius off. He shows a red card to the victim who was defending himself, leaving the one who was choking him a minute ago unpunished. Vinícius leaves the field. The Mestalla stands see him off with whistles and joyful shouts of, "Mono!" He walks slowly. He does not bow his head. He raises his hand and shows the stands a gesture, 2 fingers down. "Segunda." He tells them, "You will be relegated to the 2nd division, and I will remain a king." He is escorted into the tunnel area. That night, he did not stay silent on social networks either. He wrote a post that went down in history as the loudest manifesto against racism in European soccer. This is not the first time, not the second, and not the third. Racism is normal in La Liga. The championship that once belonged to Ronaldinho, Ronaldo, Cristiano, and Messi today belongs to racists. A beautiful nation that welcomed me, but that agreed to export to the world the image of a racist country. I am strong, and I will go to the end against racists, even if this end is far from here. These words were like an earthquake. They forced the president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, to make a special statement in defense of his citizen. They forced the Spanish government to make excuses. They forced La Liga to blush with shame and finally begin real investigations. The police arrested those fans whom Vinícius pointed out at the Mestalla. They were banned from visiting stadiums for life. Those who hanged the mannequin on the bridge were also found and sent behind bars. Thanks to one guy who refused to lower his finger, a whole country was forced to look in the mirror and be horrified by its reflection. He did not just win the Champions League, he defeated the system. He became a symbol. His struggle went far beyond the soccer lawn. He headed a special FIFA committee to combat racism. He became the voice of those millions of black children around the world who endure humiliation on the streets, in schools, on sports grounds, and who are told to just stay silent. Now they had their idol, an idol who taught them that one cannot stay silent, that one's pain can and must be defended, and that the best weapon against hate is one's own, sincere, indestructible joy. In the following 2023 to 2024 season, when many thought that after such psychological pressure he would want to leave Spain, he did what true winners do. He put on the iconic shirt with the number 7, the number of Cristiano Ronaldo, the number of Raúl, the number that means absolute power in Madrid. He took the field. And he again led Real Madrid to victory in the Champions League. He again scored in the final, again against Borussia Dortmund at Wembley. He became the best player of the tournament. He became the main contender for the Ballon d'Or. He danced. He smiled. He did not give them a single centimeter of his space. When we look at his story today, in the summer of 2026, we understand that Vinícius Jr. is not just a soccer player. He is a cultural phenomenon. He is a person who has combined in himself two completely different hypostases. On the field, he is a cold-blooded, mathematically precise, ruthless killer, created by the lessons of Carlo Ancelotti. A predator who knows how to stop time in the penalty box and does not forgive mistakes. But off the field, in his soul, he remained that same child of the favela, for whom dance and a smile are a form of survival. He showed that European rationalism does not necessarily have to destroy the Latin American soul, that one can play at the highest level, one can win all the trophies in the world, but at the same time not turn into a soulless robot. One can continue to dance. How many times did they want to break him? Let's count. Poverty in São Gonçalo, exhausting trips and buses, the pressure of a 45 million price tag at 18 years old, the laughter of the entire internet. Benzema's words in the tunnel of Mönchengladbach, monkey grunts in dozens of stadiums, a hanged mannequin, the choking on the Mestalla field, and an unfair red card. Every one of these episodes could have become the finale of someone's career. Every one of them left deep scars. But every time, after every blow of fate, Vinícius got up, brushed the dust off his snow-white uniform, and asked for the ball again. Because there, where he came from, no one promised him an easy life. Success was not written into his DNA. His life is not a gift. It is a trophy that he tore with his teeth from a system that from the very beginning was set up against him. And therefore, to finally realize the scale of this person, we must leave the crowded stands of the Santiago Bernabéu. We must forget about the Champions League, about the Ballon d'Or, about luxurious cars, and about camera flashes. We must return to where it all began, and where the true meaning of his legacy lies. We transport ourselves back across the Atlantic Ocean. Night. São Gonçalo. The thick, humid air smells of asphalt cooling down after a long, hot day. On a narrow, pothole-ridden street, only a few dim lanterns are burning. Instead of a lawn, there is red dust mixed with stones. From open windows, the rhythms of funk and the distant barking of dogs can be heard. On this street, under the dim light, all alone, a 6-year-old boy is playing. He is dressed in washed-out, torn shorts. There are no shoes on his feet, only calluses and dirt. He does not have a real ball. There is only a half-deflated, worn rubber sphere that barely bounces off the ground. The boy dribbles this ball past imaginary defenders. He imagines that the red dust of the favela is the green carpet of a European stadium. He makes a sharp body movement. He pushes the deflated ball between two stones that serve as his goals. And as soon as the ball crosses this imaginary line, the boy does not run home. He does not lower his head. He stops in the middle of the empty, dark street. A wide, toothless, absolutely sincere and happy smile spreads across his face. He begins to dance. Clumsily, funnily, but with that same rhythmic grace that is embedded in his blood. He dances because he knows. Somewhere out there, across the ocean, in a city of millionaires, there is a guy just like him, who once ran through these same streets. A guy who was told that he was a nobody. A guy who was betrayed, laughed at, hated, and wanted to be destroyed. But this guy did not give up. He forced the whole world to accept his rules of the game. He forced them to stop and look at his dance. As long as this little boy in São Gonçalo continues to dance on the broken asphalt, despite the poverty around him, the legacy of Vinícius Jr. will live forever. Because he proved the main truth of this world. Hate can scream very loudly. It can unite into crowds. It can hang mannequins on bridges. But hate is never, under any circumstances, able to defeat pure, fearless joy that has the courage to look it right in the eyes. The smile of the boy from the favela turned out to be stronger than an entire system. And this smile forever changed the history of soccer. Baila Vini. Dance. Until the very end.